Okay, so we learned in the first video that there are specific skills that you need to pass your viva. So in this video, I'm going to first of all talk a bit about the theory of what I'm trying to do, and then we'll talk about the mechanics and the psychology of the viva itself from both a candidate perspective and an examiner perspective. After that, I'll be talking about the theory of skill development that underpins what I'm trying to do with these viva skills sessions. And finally, we'll be talking about the importance of the STEM. In a separate video that I'll make after this one, I'll give you some demonstrations of how to use your 2 minutes of reading time to provide you with some exemplars so that you can go away and practice this skill in your own time and develop it independently. So what am I trying to do? Well, part of what I'm trying to do with these viva skills training sessions is developing this thing we call evaluative judgment in you, the candidate. So what is evaluative judgment? Well, evaluative judgment, as you can see here, is the capability to make decisions about the quality of work of oneself and others. And if you've got an interest in medical education, you can go and look up this paper, which was in Higher Education 2018 by Joanna Tai, who's actually a doctor who graduated from Monash. And what we'll be doing in the actual sessions is getting you to self-assess, to peer assess, to give feedback to one another, to develop your own rubrics, that is your own sort of marking schema in your heads, and provide examples of good vivas and not so good vivas. Now, as we saw previously, looking at the ANZCA website and the previous exam reports, vivas are created with the expectation to be realistic and replicate real-life scenarios. What I was always told is that you should aim for your viva to be a discussion between two peers about what they do in a difficult scenario. And that was certainly my experience in 7 out of my 8 viva stations. Hopefully, what you should be able to say for each scenario is that, in your experience, this is how you've handled it previously. From a candidate perspective, most of you are going to be on edge with a surge of catecholamines for the 2 hours of the exam. If you haven't practiced and put in the right systems, you'll fall back into your natural style, which for some of you may be slightly disorganized. You'll probably have a very high cognitive load, and if you're disorganized, you may miss important parts of information by feeling overwhelmed. From an examiner perspective, and before I go on, I must make this disclaimer that I'm not a Part 2 examiner, but I do have some experience in assessing long cases for the Faculty of Pain Medicine. That the examiners will see themselves as gatekeepers protecting the public from inexperienced and unsafe anaesthetists. What they want to see you demonstrate is your years of experience. They want you to show the sound judgment that flows from that experience and prove that you have a structured approach to problems so that you don't mix things. And this should all be mixed in with a little bit of flexibility. So just note that this word on flexibility is a warning not to lock yourself into one way of thinking during the exam, because you may just bury yourself in a hole if you do. Now, the examiners are all humans, and as humans, they're fallible, and they bring their own biases into the exam. We also are very quick to judge as humans, and the impressions that the examiners make in that first stanza of each viva station will unconsciously influence their interaction with you and the flow of the station. From a cognitive perspective, the vivas are also incredibly taxing on the examiners. It's extremely hard for them to maintain concentrations for long periods of time, and they may actually zone out and miss some of the things that you say. Your job is to wake them up and give them the impression in that first stanza that you are experienced, safe, and structured. If you can achieve that, you will put both yourself and the examiner at ease. If they form the impression that you're safe and competent, they may overlook minor errors or deficits. However, if you're average or below average in those first crucial moments, you may end up in some trouble because the examiner will then be looking for gaps in your knowledge. I like to think of it this way. No one kicks the tires of a brand new car, probably because they have the expectation that nothing is wrong with it. However, if the car is second-hand with some rust here and there, you're going to be looking for other faults, even if the engine is perfectly sound. So then that brings us to the next question of how do we develop skills? Think for a moment about how children develop the ability to speak. We don't give them lessons, do we? They pick it up as they go from observation and practice, and a little bit of correction as well. So in terms of skill development, I personally like the model put forward by John Maxwell in his book, Developing the Leaders Around You, combined with this swoosh model, which we have here for teaching in the operating room. Okay, so this is the swoosh model. This is the article from the Journal of Surgical Education in 2013. Now, they've actually set up a website, and this tells you all about the swoosh scale, which uses show and tell, active help, passive help, and supervision only. Maxwell takes a slightly different approach, which we'll see here. So this is the book, Developing the Leaders Around You. And here he uses a 5-step model. So the first step is I model. So this is the show and tell that Swish is talking about. Begins by doing the task while the person being trained watches. So I will be doing that in our Viva skills session. So I will actually be the candidate, and you guys will be the examiners, and you will watch me squirm probably as you ask me questions. The next step is I mentor, where there will be points where I might explain my thinking during the practice Viva. Then we'll swap places. This is the I monitor, and I'll be asking the trainees to start performing the task. Okay, and at some points in time, especially where you're digging yourself in a hole, I'll stop you and I'll show you how it could be done better. The next step is I motivate, where I take myself out of the task and let you go. So this is where we start doing the Viva's more real life situation where I won't interrupt you. And then step 5 is I multiply, and that's where you guys should be able to do it amongst yourselves, giving Viva practice to one another, but also to the trainees that you help in the future. The other little bit of theory that I'd like to talk about is the dual system process theory, which is based on the work of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. These two were cognitive psychologists, and basically the whole, well, not the whole, but a lot of the field of heuristics and biases comes from their work. In the lead up to the exams, basically what we need to do is have you so well trained in the things that you can control, that is, your 2 minutes with the stem and preparing your opening statement, that it becomes automatic. This is effectively trying to transfer a lot of the cognitive processes from System 2, that is the slow, deliberate thinking, into System 1, which is the fast, intuitive thinking. So what are these skills that are involved in demonstrating this experience, this judgment, and this structure in your Viva? The ability to answer questions verbally is a start, and we'll practice this at the Viva skills tutorial. The other thing that you could do is possibly go to public speaking groups like Toastmasters, and here we've got Toastmasters website, and you can find a club that sort of suits your time and your location. The other skill that's linked to this is using the appropriate phrases and terms which the examiners will want to hear. And again, we'll practice and workshop this in the tutorials. However, the most important skill, I believe, is reading the STEM and synthesizing all the important information into a succinct opening statement that basically wakes the examiner out of their daze, hits them between the eyes, and makes them feel that the candidate sitting in front of them is an experienced and competent anaesthetist who's done all of this before and who the examiner would be happy to anesthetize them or their family. Using this 2 minutes will help you to overlook or to avoid overlooking obvious detail, which they've emphasized in this exam report. And we will go through in the next video about reviewing the information provided in the STEMs.